The two stars in this 1984 film had the screen test in the director's backyard. That story and more next. Hi everyone, welcome to Retro Flicks. This is your channel for movie and TV retrospectives. Today's movie was really the first movie that Disney made under its new concept of trying to reach more of an adult audience. And they were going to do this under a label that they created called Touchstone Films. Because of Disney and their history, they had a hard time getting actors, particularly for the lead role in this movie, because actors still would see Disney and think, well, this is a kid movie. And there were some really named actors that were going for the lead role in this, and they just did not want to do that. They said, Disney and kid movie, I don't want to do that. And so they really had a difficult time trying to find the leading man for this in particular, but some other roles as well. And so that would be something that they would have to try to overcome. Today's movie is Splash from 1984. Now, to give you a quick synopsis of Splash, again, I'm not going to go the whole way to the end because if you haven't seen this movie, I don't want to ruin it all for you, but I'll give you a good synopsis here of what this movie was about. This movie follows Alan Bauer. When he was 8 years old, he jumps off a boat, and when he is underwater, he encounters a young girl. Now, suddenly, Alan, when he's underwater with this young girl, he can actually breathe underwater. And he's eventually pulled out of the water, and nobody else sees what happened down there, and he just thinks, oh, maybe I was just hallucinating, and I really didn't see what I saw, and what happened really didn't happen. Now, fast forward 20 years later, he and his brother Freddie own a wholesale food and vegetable business in New York City. And Alan is basically really straight-laced, really hard worker, hopeless romantic, and Freddie's kind of the opposite. Freddie's kind of like the free-spirited, doesn't really want a relationship, likes to date around, that sort of thing, not really into the job, just kind of the opposite of Alan. But after a breakup, Alan goes to Cape Cod just to kind of collect his thoughts, and he goes and he gets into a boating accident, and he's knocked unconscious and goes underwater. And when he goes underwater, his wallet drops down to the ocean floor. And when he wakes up, he's on the beach, and there's a beautiful young woman there, and the beautiful young woman can't talk. He asks her questions, she can't talk, and she kisses him, smiles, and then goes back into the water. And then when she goes back in the water, you can see she turns into a mermaid. Well, when she does this, she's spotted by a scientist by the name of Dr. Kornbluth, Dr. Walter Kornbluth. And he can't believe what he saw. Well, the girl, she swims down now as a mermaid. She swims down actually and gets Alan's wallet, and then goes to a shipwreck and uses an old map there of New York, real old map, but is able then to locate Alan through that. And basically the rest of the movie is, and she goes and finds Alan in New York City. And basically the rest of the movie is really Alan trying to deal with, his feelings for her, even though he knows she's a mermaid, and if she goes with him, or if he goes with her, he's not going to be able to come back. And it also, at the same time, he is trying to keep the scientist, Dr. Kornbluth, and then his group of people away from her because they want to capture her. So that's what the rest of the movie kind of deals with that. And so I'm not going to go any further than that. Again, if you haven't seen this, I hope you go and watch this. So I'll leave it at that. But that's a basic synopsis of this movie. Now the cast is Alan Bauer, who just mentioned there, is played by Tom Hanks. We all know, Tom Hanks. He's obviously one of the maybe the best actor, one of the best actors ever. Certainly one of the most bankable actors ever, of course. And I'm going to talk about him a little bit here in a few minutes. Darryl Hannah. Darryl Hannah was really unknown there. A lot of unknowns here, except for one I'll talk about later. He's pretty known at this time. But Darryl Hannah would go on to do movies like Legal Eagles and Roxanne, and she played the mermaid who Alan named Madison. And then, of course, the next guy who did have a name even at that time was John Candy. He had already did Vacation, obviously for SCTV, but he was still making his way up. But he probably had more of a name than anybody in this movie, and he plays the brother of Alan, Freddie. And then there's Eugene Levy. You might know Eugene Levy from the American Pie movies. And Eugene Levy actually is an SCTV member, or was a member as well. I don't know if he was in at that time. I don't think so. I know Candy wasn't, but I don't think Levy was still there. But Candy and Levy were actually castmates at SCTV, though. And so Eugene Levy played Dr. Walter Kornbluth. And for the production of this movie, when Disney went to try to find somebody to direct this, they approached Ron Howard. Ron Howard, of course, is known from being Opie from Andy Griffith's show, then, of course, Richie Cunningham on the Happy Days. And he had just really started to end Happy Days at that point. He had already started to direct even during Happy Days. He knew he wanted to get behind the camera. So he had just come off in 1982. He just came off directing the movie Night Shift, which was Michael Keaton's first movie, and it was also starring his Happy Days castmate Henry Winkler. So Disney approached him to do this movie that they were going to distribute through Touchstone, as we said, to try to get a more adult audience. And so he definitely, he took this job and says, absolutely. He goes, I'm going to do the best I can with this. And so they tried to cast these. He tried to cast these roles, and again, the one that he had the hardest time trying to cast was the leading man. And so, because there were some name actors that he got in there, that, some of them were, for instance, Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, John Travolta, to name a few, that just weren't really interested in doing it. And so, and again, because of the Disney name and other factors, but that was a big thing from the actors, was they just didn't want to do a Disney movie because they just thought it was going to be, kid related. So he had thought about, he was like, well, there was this guy that did a guest shot in Happy Days I thought was really good. He's still relatively unknown, but he did have a little foray for a couple years on a sitcom, and that guy was Tom Hanks. And Tom Hanks had just come off 2 years of a sitcom called Bosom Buddies. And so, but Tom Hanks still wasn't really that well known. That lasted for a couple years, and Tom Hanks at this time was really actually having a real difficult time finding work. I saw an interview with him one time where he said he was unemployed for a year. He did a guest shot here and there, but that was about it. That he was almost going to lose his house if he didn't get something. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine Tom Hanks at one point? You think of it now. You imagine at one point he really struggled and wasn't sure if he was going to be able to continue being an actor, or even keeping his house. That's something you really think about when you look at somebody's history like that. And so he went to Tom Hanks and asked him if he would like to audition for the role. Now, Tom Hanks actually originally had auditioned for Freddie, but Ron Hanks said, "Well, I'm going to put you in the role of Alan. And I think that you would be really good in that role. So I'm going to put you with Alan. I'm going to put John Candy with Freddie, and I'm going to put you with Alan." And the studio, when they heard about this, again, Hanks being pretty unknown, the studio was like, "Oh, I don't know about this." But they were fine with John Candy because, again, he was probably the bigger name at the time. But they were not sure about Tom Hanks because he really come off 2 years of Bosom Buddies. Other than that, he really wasn't. And so they're like, well, we got to see more before we sign off on him. And so they ended up, Ron Howard and the studio makers ended up finding Darryl Hannah, who they really liked. And so they decide, well, we got to have a screen test with them. And I think it probably was more for Tom Hanks and Darryl Hannah, even though Darryl Hannah wasn't really well known at the time either, and just kind of, breaking into the business as well. But the studio just, they just weren't really, we weren't not sure about Tom Hanks. We got to see more. And so Ron Howard called up Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks thought he had the role. I mean, he thought that, okay, this is a done deal, I'm going to be in this movie. And Ron Howard called Tom Hanks and said, listen, I need you to come back, and we need to screen test a couple scenes. And I need you to do it with Darryl, who's going to play Madison in this movie. And the studio needs to see this. So Ron Howard told Tom Hanks, "You've got to bring your A game." And Tom Hanks said to Ron Howard on the phone after he said that, he was like, "Ron, is there any way after this I'm going to get fired?" And Ron Howard said, "Oh, no, don't worry about that. No." And Tom Hanks, I saw an interview with him, and Tom Hanks said, "I didn't believe him for a second. I did not believe him for a second. I knew I had to go and do the best job I can and bring my A game, or I wasn't getting this role." And so they ended up going to Ron Howard's house, and they were going to screen test in the backyard of Ron Howard's house. And back in the early 80s, if any of you grew up back then, you knew they had the video cameras. There was the one big ones that you had back at that time, and then there was the little handheld ones that had the little strap, right? And you still put a videotape in it, but it was like a smaller handheld video camera. And so Ron Howard comes out in the backyard with this little handheld video camera, and he's going to video the scenes that Tom Hanks and Darryl Hannah do, and then send it off to the studios for them to see, which they did. And of course, obviously, everything worked out, and Tom Hanks kept the job and became Alan Bauer in the movie. So that's the Tom Hanks story. I always think that's such an interesting story about this movie. And so you look at the box office of this film. It was an $11 million budget. It ended up doing $70 million when it was all said and done. And it was the 10th highest grossing movie of 1984. So it did really well. My memory of this movie is, and I loved this movie as a kid, and I remember this is that time where you had HBO. HBO just came in. We had just got HBO at my house. And so you're starting to see some of these movies that are made start to pop in. And so this one I probably saw probably like in 85. It was released in 84. Usually, like I said, it took about 6 months to a year to get on HBO. So I'm thinking probably, late-ish 84, maybe into 85. And I loved it so much that back at this time too, I don't know if you're old enough, you remember the old Columbia House records where you would buy like 12 records for a penny or something like that. I don't remember about, and then they would send you this. You bought like one and you got 12 for a penny or something like that. Well, they did the same thing for videotapes. And so there were standalone videotapes, just that movie on that videotape. And I got War Games and I got Splash for those two. I don't think I got any more. I don't remember the exact deal with it, but it was kind of like the Columbia House record, but they did with videotapes at the time, because VCRs were just coming into households. I had just got one. We just got a VCR and just got HBO at this time. So that's my memory of this movie. It really is a good movie. So if you get a chance, I would really recommend watching it. These are the places you can stream it. If you would like to see this movie, you can stream it on Disney Plus. You can get it on Prime Video, Vudu, and Apple TV. Now, right now, from what I can see, those are the places that you can stream Splash. So I hope you like this today. I just thought this was kind of an interesting movie to do, and so please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Really help the channel, and please comment. I would love to talk to you guys about, if you go out and watch this movie, if you haven't seen it before, tell me what you think of it, and if you have seen it, what were your memories of it, or anything that you want to say. I'd love to get a dialogue with everybody out there on these movies. So I really appreciate it, and until next time, that's a wrap.